If you will ask me today, what is the most important challenge of me as a therapist, I will very clearly tell you, promote post-traumatic growth.
You are not your anxiety. You can be separate from your anxiety. You can use it as information, but if it's out of proportion to what's happening, if it's not adding value, it's not helpful. When you know that, you can not take it so seriously. And over time, you can retrain yourself so you're not so vulnerable.
There's a place where you can right now belong to in what you're trying to deal with. What we know is that one of the main problems with dealing with trauma and chaos is that it usually isolates people and that they have to go through it alone, and it doesn't work.
I think basically you have to just be there and allow the person to go through his trauma in a safe environment in which he can feel held, understood, and welcomed.
If you experience fear or insecurity, allow the fear, it's very honest, allow the anger or the protection, but begin to look at that. What will happen if I support this narrative? What will be the result? Is it a positive narrative? Is it bringing hope?
Welcome to Raw. This episode is a little different. Over the past few years, I've had conversations with psychiatrists, psychologists, meditation teachers, trauma experts, and people who have been working very close to the deepest wounds of Israeli society since October 7th. And again, the same questions kept coming up. What does trauma actually do to us? Not only as individuals, but as families, communities, and a country. What helps us heal? What is resilience really? Is it pushing through? Is it functioning? Is it being able to sleep at night or make dinner or go to work or get your kids to school? Or is resilience something more subtle? The ability to keep feeling, to keep loving, to keep choosing who we want to be, even when the world around us feels shattered. In this episode, I've brought together excerpts from 5 conversations that each taught a different layer of trauma and resilience. We'll begin with Professor Shlomo Mendlovic, a psychiatrist and the director of the Shalvata Mental Health Center, who speaks about severe mental illness, the humanity of psychiatric care, and why he believes the most important challenge now is not only resilience, but post-traumatic growth. Then we'll hear from Dr. Lia Naor, a clinical psychologist, researcher, and nature-based therapist, about the healing power of nature, community, belonging, and the healing spaces that emerged after October 7th. After that, psychiatrist Dr. Oded Arbel will take us into the body, into what trauma does beneath words, and why treatment has to include more than talking. Then Stephen Fulder, founder of Tovana and one of Israel's senior meditation teachers, will speak about fear, narratives, contraction, and the possibility of staying ethically awake, even under threat. And finally, Rick Hansen, the world-renowned psychologist and author, will offer a very practical and deeply human way to understand anxiety, how to recognize when the body's alarm system is activated, how not to be hijacked by it, and how to take refuge in the 1% that is actually under our control. This episode is not about fixing trauma, and it's definitely not about pretending that everything is okay. It's about asking what helps us remain human inside it. We begin inside one of the places many people are most afraid to imagine, a psychiatric hospital. When I spoke with Professor Shlomo Mendlovic, who heads Shalvata Mental Health Center, I was struck by the tenderness with which he spoke about people in the most extreme mental and emotional states. There is so much stigma around psychiatric illness and around psychiatric hospitals in particular. But what Professor Mendlovic describes is not a place of abandonment. It is a place where people are met, held, treated, and slowly accompanied back toward life. And in the aftermath of October 7th, his message to Israeli society was both simple and demanding. We need to promote post-traumatic growth. not to erase trauma, not to make meaning too quickly, but to allow something else to begin growing beside the wound.
Personally, I feel that I'm very privileged to be psychically hosted by persons who are really in the most extreme places, mental places or emotional places persons can be. And I'm there, and this is what I'm doing. And I'm trapped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a good sense.
In a good sense, yeah.
Yeah. What would you like the public to know about Shalvata? When people hear Shalvata, the mental health psychiatric hospital, for a lot of people, I assume it immediately invokes images that we came across or movies or inner fears that they have. What is something that you would like to say to kind of a general audience about what this place is, what it means, and what it does?
First of all, I would like people to know that we offer much help to persons that suffer from severe mental illness. Almost all the patients in Shalvata are in the hospital for a very short period of times, and then they go back to their lives. They have difficult lives, but they do live full, meaningful lives. I would like people to know that psychiatric illnesses, even the most severe illnesses, schizophrenia, severe bipolar disorders, severe borderline personality disorders, I wouldn't say that they are curable, but they are manageable in a way that our patients really live full life. And the second thing that I would like people to know is that Shalvata has more than 700 employees that are totally devoted to go to the most horrifying places that human beings can be there and hand by hand take our patients out of there. All of them are extremely devoted, and this is something that I admire.
At this point in time, what would you say is the main mental health challenge in Israeli society? And has that changed since October 7th?
If you will ask me today, what is the most important challenge of me as a therapist, of Shalvata as an institution, of the Klalit as Kupat Cholim, who takes care of more than half of this country, and of the Israeli society, I will very clearly tell you, promote post-traumatic growth. That's the most important thing to do now.
I was thinking that you would say the word resilience, but I think they overlap.
It's all the same. Resilience is your ability to stabilize yourself and move forward. Post-traumatic growth means something which is more complicated. It means that you acknowledge the fact that there is a trauma, but besides this trauma, there is something that starts to grow. It does not eliminate the trauma. Nothing is being erased. No one will erase the sights, the sounds, the smell of the things that we all experienced during the beginning of this war. But if we will be able to contain it, somehow to contain it in an efficient way, and to let just beside it something else to grow, this will be wonderful. For example, I'll give you a small example. Now there are many hostages that are being interviewed, and you listen to them, and you see how courageously they have the trauma, and just beside it, there's something else. They're growing something else. And that's the most important thing that we have to deal with now.
What are some of the things that you think are most important for people to know, for people who are struggling, maybe are having difficulty sleeping, or have a lot of anxiety, a racing heart, or feel a little bit empty and depressed about the state of the world, or have kind of like coping mechanisms that don't serve them, overeating, consuming things that they would rather not be consuming? So the people who don't come to Shalvata are not the most extreme cases. What would you want them to know if they were to hear, maybe one or two sentences from you?
I will give two contradictory tips, and each one will take care to all of them. The first thing is trust the process. trust the process of us as human beings to be resilient and to shake all these terrible things and continue life. Trust the process. And the second thing is seek help. And these are two contradictory things, because if you trust the process, why to seek help? And if you seek help, then you don't trust the process. But you have to combine these two for yourselves and for your beloved ones. And this is also very important. Once, not many years ago, I went with Anat and we were wandering Neve Tzedek, which is a neighbor in the south of Tel Aviv, and she entered a clothing shop, and I sat there, with nothing to do because I have nothing to do in clothing shops. And then I had a phone call from Shalvata, and I spoke in the phone, just something very procedural. And then the salesperson, a male, came to me and asked me, "You're the psychiatrist?" And I said, "Yes, I'm a psychiatrist." And he told me, "I need an advice from you." And I told him, "Okay, ask."
He recognized you from somewhere?
No, he heard that I spoke with
okay.
Shalvata, so he understood that I'm a psychiatrist. And then he told me that he had a motorcycle accident, and he has very mild symptoms, and they are becoming better, but he wants to sue the insurance for this. And do I have any tip to give him? So I told him, don't sue. Don't do it. Just say thanks that everything is okay. And I know that it sounds a little bit peculiar because maybe you can get some benefit, or maybe you should acknowledge your symptoms, but it seems as if you are in a good shape and you are becoming better and better. Try to focus on yourself getting better. For several years, every Rosh Hashanah, he sent me a bottle of wine for the good advice. And he told me, as time elapses, I understand how fortunate I was not to deal with it too much, just to trust the process. This is what we are as human beings go through. And in many cases, you can't trust the process, and then you have to seek help. But I think that you constantly have to balance these two things: trust the process and seek help if needed.
What I find so powerful in what Professor Mendlovic says is the paradox. Trust the process and seek help. On the one hand, there is something in us that knows how to move through pain, how to metabolize experience, how to return to life. And on the other hand, we are not meant to do this alone. That idea that healing requires both inner resources and a holding environment leads directly into my conversation with Dr. Lia Naor. Lia's work begins with a very basic but often forgotten truth. We are part of nature. Our nervous systems did not evolve under fluorescent lights, isolated in rooms, trying to heal through words alone. For Lia, nature is not a backdrop. It is not just a pretty place to calm down. It is a living environment that can help restore belonging, perspective, awe, and connection. And after October 7th, her work became very concrete. She helped create community-centered healing spaces where survivors, families, volunteers, therapists, grandmothers, athletes, neighbors, all kinds of people could give and receive care. Because one of the deepest injuries of trauma is isolation, and one of the deepest medicines is belonging.
Before we kind of dive into the nitty-gritty of your work, just tell us a little bit in your own words about yourself and how you got to doing what you're doing and incorporating nature, because you're an academic, you have a PhD, and you don't hear it so often. It sounds like a mix between spiritual and kind of intellectual. So how did your story kind of lead you to this?
It kind of started with a basic instinct. I think that's how I healed myself, was being in nature. After I finished my army duty, I moved to Mitzpe Ramon, and I had just amazing, very, very healing experiences and got to know myself deeply. But it was something natural, and I do think that connection to nature is natural, and it helps us to connect to ourselves, but also to the bigger story or a bigger perspective. And it's not all personal. So I think that's wonderful. And I also am holding the notion that healing needs to happen in a healthy environment, because environments affect us in every way possible. And so for me, healing under light bulbs in somebody's clinic is very different than the way I feel that I need to go through the process. But it's also innate. Like, if you've had a hard day and you need to go out and take a breath or take a walk. So it's something that is innate in us, in the way we heal and what people need. And we are part of nature. And science and empirical evidence tells us the beneficial effects of being in nature and what that does. So it's kind of like a merge of my personal understandings, but also then as a researcher and academic, and trying to understand what I called the magic that I was seeing with people out there that were going through personal transformations in very little time. My life work is called Ways of Knowing. It's a center for nature-based therapies and processes of personal initiation. It's like really trying to understand transformation and healing and what works and how it works. And so it's like a never-ending love story with trying to figure that out.
You were born in California, and your parents became religious Orthodox, I think when you were 7, and moved to Israel. I believe they sent you to a school in Mea Shearim, so kind of like hardcore, I would say. You said you had a hard time kind of finding yourself and finding a sense of belonging in that community. I certainly know that for myself, nature is definitely something that makes me feel like I belong to something larger than myself, like you mentioned. Do you think that nature is kind of like your version of religion, of kind of spirituality, of looking for that bigger something that maybe your family was looking for?
Yeah, but it happened naturally, and I think that's what is very unique about nature. So it's not like looking for God or looking for a religion. It kind of happened to me and to many others in a way that's very natural, because that spiritual faculty that is innate in every one of us in our DNA, it's an option, right? We kind of believe that if you're not part of any religion or belief, then you don't have it, but it happens naturally in nature. When you just see those vast landscapes or those whales jumping up from the ocean or the sunset, that feeling of awe or that perspective that there's something that goes beyond my personal drama, takes it into a broader perspective of myself and life, and also something about the interconnectedness of all of it. So it's really something that's actually concrete when you're out there, that expansiveness and that beauty and that wonder and that magic, whether you believe or no.
So you have all this experience working with nature and nature-based therapy, and then October 7th happens. Tell us a little bit about those projects that you have been working on.
So it's a nature-based, community-centered healing space, the first in the world, hoping that we can open healing spaces all over Israel. Basically, instead of having only kupot cholim, we can have healing spaces in every community. And that the people that hold these spaces are the community. It's the strengths in the community and the people of the community. So grandmas can make cakes, and sports people can do sports, and people can come and give, and people can come and take. And basically, there's a place where you can right now belong to in what you're trying to deal with. Because what we know is that one of the main problems with dealing with trauma and chaos is that it usually isolates people, and that they have to go through it alone, and it doesn't work. So if we look at how communities, like earth-based communities, you never go through a trauma alone. You always have people around you that are reminding you who you are, and reminding you where you belong, and reminding you of your strengths, and that help you through it. So basically that's what I am really trying to create and support by consulting, by creating models of intervention. And also most of what I'm doing is research-based. So it's kind of like bringing all those different angles together and seeing if we can build something new. We know that when there is a breakdown, there can also be a breakthrough. So I think there are amazing, amazing things that are turning up after the 7th of October. We're not getting that on the news.
Definitely the first time I've heard that in a long time.
Yeah. So there are amazing, amazing things that have been created, and most of them are volunteer-based, and there are amazing people that are supporting and contributing. We're kind of like building up this healthy state while things are crumbling, and also showing the survivors and people that are really struggling right now that we as a society are taking responsibility and care for each other and are doing what we can. So it's also helping people to believe in good again and to believe in people again, which is really hard with what we all went through.
Lia speaks about nature and community as healing environments, places where people can remember that they belong to something larger than the trauma. Dr. Oded Arbel comes at this from another angle. He is a psychiatrist and psychotherapist working closely with trauma, including soldiers and people exposed to extreme events. He comes from the mainstream world of psychiatry, but his work also moves into somatic experiencing, mindfulness, Buddhism, and psychedelic-assisted treatment. And what he says here is essential. Trauma does not live only in our thoughts. It lives in the body. It affects the nervous system, the sense of safety, the capacity to trust other people and the world. So while words matter, they are not always enough. Sometimes the words are only the surface layer. The deeper healing happens through connection, safety, the body, and the slow restoration of trust.
I think the most intriguing question is, what do we do with recent trauma? How do we treat people who met trauma in the last few hours and last few days? What could prevent them from deteriorating further? Maybe we can help them not going the full path to chronic PTSD. I think our goal is to give it validation, to be a supportive net for their needs, to say the obvious that they've went through things that are extreme and not normal to experience, to explain how the soul tries to organize itself in order to heal. I think basically you have to just be there and allow the person to go through his trauma in a safe environment in which he can feel held, understood, and welcomed. Afterwards, we're trying to treat the more chronic consequences, and here we have to engage with the community. Sometimes people need to be for a period in institutions like we have here, which is a daycare unit.
I want to go a little bit deeper into these treatment modalities that you're experiencing with. First, I want to go back to what you said about the kind of traditional therapies. So what's interesting to me is you seem to be on the forefront of all these experimental, experiential therapies, such as somatic experiencing and psychedelics, mindfulness, Buddhism. At the same time, you come from a very mainstream background. You're a psychiatrist, so that's like prescribing antidepressants, etc. And you're a psychotherapist, which is based on psychoanalysis and Freud and all of that. And I'm interested in why you think that those kinds of therapies don't kind of hit the mark. Is it because traditional therapy is really kind of talk based, so you're talking about your trauma, but you're kind of staying within the realm of the rational part of your brain, trying to kind of rationalize it? And is it because that is not enough, taking into consideration the kind of experience that the body has stored the trauma?
Well, it's hard to say. I can answer this in few ways. The first is practically we see that the current therapies are not enough. I think trauma touches very, very deep wounds of not being able to trust other people mainly, and also the world. Like if the people who experienced trauma, something shatters inside them in the most basic way, which people believe that the world is a safe place and people might be good for you. So this is a very, very deep wound. So we need something which is way deeper than words. So I think even traditional psychotherapy, I think the main thing that traditional psychotherapy does is not about the words itself. It's about the connection, it's about the emotion, it's about something that is happening which is beyond words. And the words themselves are just the camouflage of what's actually happening. Also, I think many therapists don't include the body into the picture. And trauma is ingrained into your body. It affects the nervous system, it affects many, many aspects. And almost always, if not always, the body is very important part of the trauma itself. So we have to acknowledge that.
I think, maybe one hypothesis is that, the people who were most affected, and there's so many in this country, and so many of us know them, either people who were killed or injured or who are currently serving. When you see those people, I think it might be hard for a lot of civilians to say, I need help.
Yeah.
People who live in Tel Aviv and just have been watching the news for a year,
Yeah.
and who know there is a lack of mental health practitioners, etc. I also think that in time of war, maybe a lot of us are kind of like holding, kind of like tensing our bodies, our muscles, and it's still in
Waiting.
that state of fight flight where we haven't let go enough to kind of see where the deck of cards have fallen psychologically and to understand what are the implications for our own mental health.
Yeah.
What are things that you think people, average civilians, should do if they could all hear you and you had a message for them? What would you say?
Well, I think if you suffer from symptoms of post trauma, I think you should seek therapy. That's first. But also, I would encourage people to put attention on their resources, paying attention to the body, like doing meditation, yoga, any kind of sport. Connect or reconnect with your friends and community. Be around people that you love and love you. Try to be engaged in something which is creative. And I think maybe most important, um, try to remember what are your most important values as a human being. And I think doing something according to these values might be very helpful. Doing something for someone else, building something for someone else, connecting, trying to take your mind out of obsessive thinking about what can I gain to how can I give something to someone. I think that will open realms of compassion, of love, and goodness that is also in great need, but also might help people see the world more clearly and have a spiritual meaning to their existence. So I really believe this is helpful for each people to their own difficulties, not only for others. Like I recall what the Dalai Lama said. He said, if you want to be good to others, practice compassion. If you want to be good to yourself, practice compassion. So I think giving and generosity and kindness are great medications that maybe we don't take enough.
Oded's message is very practical. Seek therapy when you need it and reconnect with your body, return to community, remember your values, and do something for someone else. That last point stayed with me because when we are afraid, the mind often contracts. It becomes very focused on survival, on threat, on what might happen to me and mine. And of course, sometimes that contraction is necessary. Fear has a job. It protects us. But fear can also become a worldview. It can harden into a narrative. It can divide the world into us and them, good and evil, safe and unsafe, human and not human. This is where my conversation with Stephen Fulder begins. Stephen is the founder of Tovana, one of Israel's leading Buddhist meditation communities. He lives in Klil, in the Galilee, in deep relationship with the land, and he has spent decades practicing and teaching awareness. In this excerpt, we speak about fear, narratives, dehumanization, and what it means to stay awake. Not naive, not passive, but awake when everything in us wants to contract.
I'm trying to understand the human psyche and what can lead others and myself to sometimes be stuck in those illusions and those narratives that dehumanize. Having studied your own psyche and the human psyche for so many years, what do you think it is about fear that is so powerful? Why is a kind of compassionate, meditative ability to sit with fear and to sit with shame and to sit with guilt and to sit with rage so much harder than being swept up in a current of sheer madness and a desire for revenge?
If you experience fear or insecurity, if you have a sense of some depth, some ability to look at yourself and the world a bit more deeply, you will kind of allow the fear, it's very honest, allow the anger or the protection, but it will not build a long-term view of reality, which is the one that is as narrative. You will not support narrative, and if you support narrative, you will begin to look at that. Why? What will happen if I support this narrative? What will be the result? Is it a positive narrative? Is it bringing hope? Is it bringing joy? Is it bringing peace? So it's up to us to ask those questions. And if we don't ask those questions at all, then we can say we're in delusion. The Jewish people have a huge range of possibilities, from a very beautiful ethical, like the Talmud is 26 books, which go into fine-tuning of ethical sensitivity. And so there's a possibility of being, I would say, a big person, and therefore a big people with the gifts that are there, or a contracted people and a contracted place that have a very limited view of reality, called them against us. And from there, life doesn't work. It works maybe for a while. Maybe we'll protect ourselves. We've got a, military force, but it doesn't last forever. And that's why I think it's a very unhelpful way of securing our future. It just doesn't really work. This place of conflict burns itself out for a while, and then you have to ask what next that will create a positive future for the whole region.
You live in this spiritual, ecological community in Klil, in the Galilee, as you mentioned, which you helped co-found. Can you tell me a little bit about how that has supported you in the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's basically the land. Going out every day with it in the vegetable garden, growing my vegetables, collecting them, putting them in the pot, cooking them. The cycle of life, sowing the seeds, which I do, tending the garden, feeding my chickens. I give the chickens life. They give me life. They give eggs. I give them food. The whole cycle of life here has been immensely supportive. Going back to your deep sources of life, and that's really deeply supported me over these years, when for 2 years we had every day rockets and artillery, rockets coming in and artillery firing from all the hills around. Boom, 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 every day. I found that clearly it did really help me to develop the resources of living well, even under such circumstances.
Stephen speaks about the danger of fear turning into a long-term narrative, a contracted view of reality that may feel protective in the short term, but ultimately cannot create a livable future. And then with Rick Hansen, we move into the nervous system in a very direct way. Rick is a world-famous psychologist, meditation teacher, and the author of books on the brain, resilience, and inner strength. What I love about this excerpt is that it is both spiritual and extremely practical. Because in Israel, anxiety is not an abstract topic. We know what it feels like in the body. We know what it feels like when a siren goes off, when we grab our children, when the body floods with stress hormones, and then hours later, we are still tense in the shower, in the kitchen, at the dinner table. Rick makes an important distinction. Fear can be useful when there is something to do, but once we are already doing what can be done, extra anxiety often stops helping. It becomes suffering layered on top of danger. And his invitation is not to deny reality. It is to relate differently to the alarm inside us, to know, I am not my anxiety. My body is activated, but I do not have to be hijacked by it. I can take control of the small piece that is mine to take care of.
When your body starts getting upset, if you have mindfulness, if you have some self-awareness, you can get some space around it. You can realize, oh, my body is cranked up right now. And it's there. I can have compassion and should have compassion for myself, but I do not need to overestimate what it means. My autonomic nervous system, my hormones, they're rolling, but I do not have to be hijacked by them. I can be separate from them. I can recognize all that as like a car alarm going off. That is unpleasant and worrisome, but it's meaningless. It's not useful information. And that's an incredibly good thing to know, that you are not your anxiety. You can be separate from your anxiety. You can use it as information. To the extent that anxiety is useful, it's informative. There's a term, signal anxiety. But if it's out of proportion to what's happening, if it's not adding value, you're already dealing with the threat from a place of calm strength. You don't need to add the dread in your belly. It actually erodes your capacity to deal with the threat. It's not helpful besides making you suffer. When you know that, you can not take it so seriously. And over time, you can retrain yourself so you're not so vulnerable to that kind of priming of anxiety that distorts things and makes you, go in wrong directions.
So for me, at least, this has been a process that has taken me years to acquire these tools of mindfulness, etc. But in this time of war, I guess to kind of give it a specific example, it might mean, for example, that when the sirens go off, I know I have to run to the shelter. In that moment, it makes absolute sense for my body's stress hormones to be elevated, for my heart rate to rise, and for me to be able to be in that fight, flight, freeze moment so I can grab my kids really quickly and go to the shelter. Afterwards, I might then notice that my body is still in that state of fight, flight, freeze, for example, when I'm cooking with my kids or when I'm in the shower. And perhaps that's the time that I might notice that this anxiety is not really serving me right now. And in fact, that I'm feeding it with information that I'm consuming on social media and in the news and thoughts that are that I am ruminating. Is that what you mean in a kind of practical sense?
Yeah. I don't like being afraid. I don't like the experience. I'm kind of temperamentally prone to it. And it's really, really, really important to remember that we can function at a high level. We can respond to threat. We can be vigilant. We can be prudent. We can be tough. We can fight back. We can be fiery, all without being hijacked by fear. Just realizing that that's possible and recognizing people for whom that's true. There's anxiety maybe around the edges, but in the core of their being, they are doing what they need to do without being invaded by anxiety in its various forms. So we can help ourselves in the moment not be flooded by and hijacked by anxiety that isn't helpful. And each person gets to decide how much anxiety is helpful. If you want to feel a lot of it, or you think it's okay, if it's helpful for you, if it adds value to what you're going to do anyway, okay. But otherwise, in the moment, you could do specific things that people do when they function in threatening situations, to keep reminding yourself that the actual odds of that missile landing on your home, on your head, on your children right now are actually extremely low. I'm not in any way trying to minimize anything, and I recognize I've never lived through a war. I've never been in a country that's been under historical attack, as Israel has. That said, factually, the odds are actually really low. You can remind yourself of that, and you can remind yourself that in this moment, there's a kind of radical acceptance. I am doing everything I can. I'm grabbing my kids. I'm moving out the door. I'm grabbing the teddy bear with me along the way. I'm doing everything I can. There are things you can do in the moment. You can try to regulate your breathing. You can try to calm your body. You can bring in a sense of social support. Love is flowing out and flowing in. You are caring for others. You are centered in your love for them and your duty to them. And there are others who are caring for you. And you're in a larger network. So you can remind yourself of these things in the moment. I take great lessons from people who've lived through horrible conditions, including Viktor Frankl, a Jewish man, of course, well known, lived through the Holocaust himself in the camps, who essentially said that in the core of our being is that most fundamental freedom to choose how we will respond to our circumstances, even if there's nothing our bodies can do differently. But in the innermost being, we have existential choice and therefore responsibility there. So there is something to take refuge in here, which is the refuge of knowing that you're doing all that you can, that 99% of what's coming at you is out of your control, but you are taking control of the 1% that's under your influence. You're taking control of what you say to your children. You're taking control of the steps you walk. You're taking control of what's happening inside your thoughts and feelings, or especially you're taking control of your relationship to them as they arise. And then you let go, and you give up. And it's a scary thing to say, but and again, people who've lived through these horrible things will say it, there's great inner peace in knowing that most of it's out of your control, and you live in the moment, not knowing what the future brings. And in the moment, you can take refuge in the knowing that you are actually basically all right now. You're running to the shelter. You're processing the person across the dinner table who's yelling at you. But in the core of your being, you're still here, still going. At this point, I tend to swear in my mind. I won't do it on this recording, but it's like,
You can. In Israel, we swear,
okay.
of course.
I mean, there's an existential statement. I'm going to do it. Fuck you. I'm going to live well meanwhile, in the core of my being. That's not about a spiritual bypass or any kind of resort. It's existential. It basically says, I see you. That's what the Buddha mythically, or actually did on his own awakening. I see you, Mara. I see you, forces of delusion and darkness and despair and trouble and all the rest of that. And I'm still here moment by moment by moment until I'm not. And there's a refuge in that.
Listening back to these conversations together, I hear 5 different doorways into the same question. How do we live after rupture? Professor Shlomo Mendlovic reminds us that even severe suffering can be met with dignity, treatment, and hope, and that post-traumatic growth means allowing something new to grow beside what cannot be erased. Dr. Lia Naor reminds us that healing happens in environments, in nature, in community, in belonging, in places where people do not have to carry trauma alone. Dr. Oded Arbel reminds us that trauma is not only a story in the mind, it is also in the body, in the nervous system, in trust, in the places beneath words, and that healing may require connection, movement, creativity, generosity, and values. Stephen Fulder reminds us to be careful with the narratives fear creates, to ask what a story is doing to us, whether it is bringing hope, clarity, peace, and life, or whether it is shrinking us. And Rick Hansen reminds us that even when so much is outside our control, there is still a small but sacred space of choice. How we relate to our fear, how we speak to our children, how we breathe, how we act, how we stay connected to love. None of this is easy, and none of it means that trauma disappears. But maybe resilience is not about being untouched. Maybe it is about being touched, deeply touched, and still finding ways to stay connected to life, to seek help when we need it, to trust the process when we can, to remember the body, to return to nature, to be with people, to give, to question the stories that harden us, and to keep choosing, moment by moment, what kind of human being we want to become inside the reality we did not choose. Thank you for listening to Raw.
That's it for today. Thank you for listening to Raw. You can subscribe on any podcast platform and join our community at withanook.com. Share this episode if it resonated with you, and I'll see you next time.